Okay, we are on YouTube.
Mm.
Let's start recording. We're almost ready, and we can just start. People will come in.
Do you want me to start? Do you want to start?
I'll. Sorry, could you hear that?
A little bit of background noise, not much.
Okay, I got rid of it. That was us on YouTube.
Oh,
So,
look at that.
yeah, I will introduce you, and then we can start. So, hi
Sounds good.
everybody. If you haven't been with us before, welcome. This is Shawn Jacobson, our CompGov teacher at Five Bowl, and he's also a bit of a pro at talking about current events. And so he's going to debrief the debate with us, and we're going to kind of move through based on the announced topics for the debate. And we know that they kind of sometimes veer off of those topics, so we'll make sure that we try to address everything that was said. And while we're going, feel free to use the chat to ask questions that you had about the debate, or you can ask questions about anything that Shawn talks about, or you can just share things that you know about the candidates or about any of the topics. So without further ado, Shawn, take it away.
Hi there. Yeah. So as Kate said, I'm Shawn Jacobson. I am the AP CompGov teacher, and I'm here for the last presidential debate for a long time. So, I gotta hit the buttons. Nope. Okay. Follow if you're here, you probably already do, but follow Think Fiveable, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Good stuff. Good place to get all that stuff. These were the 6 topics that they talked about, and pretty much stuck to them. Some other things, but there was COVID, national security, economy, immigration, race in America, and climate change were the big topics. So here we go. I'm just going to give you the facts. So the coronavirus, that's the first thing they started out with. And Trump was saying, hey, there were spikes. Those spikes are gone. He was talking about Florida. He was talking about Texas and some other states. And the vaccine is coming within weeks. And then later clarified that by saying by the end of the year. And the companies that would be doing that would either be Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, Pfizer, and some others. He keeps with we're rounding the corner, it's going away, and that our mortality rate has shrunken by 85%. Whereas Biden was saying we're averaging about 1,000 deaths a day, 70,000 new cases a day. He wants, if he becomes president, to invest in rapid testing and then to have national standards as to how we should open up schools and businesses to be safe. And he quoted the New England Medical Journal saying that the president has been he has responded tragically to this whole thing. So let's get into some of these facts. So the current rates, not including today's data, which just got updated right before this, the deaths range anywhere from 368 to 1,208. So on Sundays, the numbers are lower across the country. Either nothing gets reported well, or people don't go to the hospital on Sundays. It's one of those. And the cases are somewhere between 47,000 and 7,500, depending on the day. I believe today they just went over 80,000 for the first time. So then we talk about the mortality rate, which for the U.S. is 2.7%, which is 150th out of 199 in the world. That's low. That's not good. And the deaths per 100,000 are even worse. We have about 68 deaths per 100,000, which puts us at 10th worst in the entire country. This is all coming from Johns Hopkins. The cases have steadily risen since November 1st, but the deaths have stayed the same since, I got to move. I think it says August. Yep, August 1st. That's what that says. They continued about the coronavirus to the point where they said, Trump saying, I take full responsibility. It's not my fault that it came here. It's China's fault. And then he was saying how Biden just stays in the basement. He can do that, whereas Trump can't do that because he's the president. He has to do all these different things. And that Biden, all he talks about is the shutdowns. Trump wants to open schools. The transmittal rate to teachers is very small. And then he talked about how the lockdowns have caused a ton of suicides, depression, alcohol, and drug rates, and also a ton of abuse with all these different things. Biden went and said Trump originally said that China was being transparent, and we owe Xi Jinping, the premier, a debt of gratitude for how forthcoming he was being. Trump was saying we learned to live with it, and Biden said no, people are learning to die with it. That was a powerful message that came across. He does not. Biden is saying, I do not believe in shutting down the nation. He believes in having standards in communities and open those communities safely when things happen. But that schools need more money for ventilation systems, smaller classes, more teachers to do all this work. Are there any questions about the coronavirus aspect to this?
Yeah, there's a question that came in through the chat, and they've talked about this at all of the debates.
Right.
They said a lot of the same stuff. I found the statistic you shared about how poor our mortality rate is compared to other countries really enlightening. I hadn't known that before. But someone asked, what does it mean when Trump said that Biden stays in the basement?
So in the first couple of months, up until about June, maybe a little later, Biden set up a TV studio in his basement where he was doing his interviews and he was doing fundraisers via Zoom. And that's how he was conducting his campaign, quote, in the basement. But he has been on the campaign trail pretty much since August, if not July, going around pretty actively. So there's truth to that statement, but it's a little outdated at the same time.
And I'd love to talk about schools because I live in Boston, and Boston public schools
just shut down,
pulled the plug. And I know you're a New York City teacher. So what is really happening in schools? Because it feels like, from a teacher's perspective, that it's actually sort of a mess from hearing from my friends and other teachers.
So I talked to teachers around the country, and today one of my friends in Louisiana said there was spread in his school and they were doing all the contact tracing and they were going to shut down. Myself in New York City, we have 3 different cohorts. We have the in-person a couple days a week, the other half a couple of weeks, another cohort, online another couple of weeks. It's the quality of education is suffering because of this, because you're just trying to keep everything together. There are schools that are doing this well. I believe the schools that went all remote are probably doing well. I believe the schools that are all in person are having some success. Whether or not their rates are great is another thing. But the hybrid aspect is, from personal experience, is just, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Yeah. All right. I'll let you go to the next one.
Sure.
I know we have a bunch.
Okay. Then we talked about, they talked about, I wasn't there. National security. Trump was talking about the director of national, the DNI, national intelligence. I think that's what it is. Said Russia wants me to lose because they've gotten tougher. He's been tough on Russia. So there was a report earlier in the week saying that foreign actors had gotten a hold of voter information and were contacting them, sending them threatening emails. So that's what they're talking about with that. He was praising that he got NATO countries to put an extra $130 billion towards NATO and apparently $420 billion this year. And then Trump started his first of the personal attacks against Biden with Biden, quote, taking a lot of money from Russia. On the flip side, Biden said anyone who interferes in American elections will pay the price, namely Iran, Russia, and China. Then he started with the personal-ish attacks. I don't know if Rudy Giuliani is personal, but he said Rudy Giuliani is being used as a Russian pawn. Said Putin is paying bounties to kill American soldiers. That was a conversation from maybe August. In Afghanistan, and he's working to destabilize all of NATO. And to that, Trump has been silent. So there is no clear-cut answer as to whether or not Rudy Giuliani is a pawn to the Russian government. It's disputed on both ends of the intelligence community. So there's that. Then they went from national security to Trump's taxes, because that's national security. And Trump was saying, well, my accounts are under audit, which is something he's been saying for 4 years. He will release them as soon as he can, and that he prepaid his taxes into tens of thousands of millions of dollars. And the $750 fee was something that was just a filing fee. Then a new report came out this week about having a bank account in China, which he claimed he closed in 2013. And then he said China is paying $25 billion to our American farmers because of soybeans and some other things. And then North Korea came up and he said, we have a good relationship with North Korea. Nothing has happened since he's been president. There's been no war. That was in response to new testing that happened this week or last week. Then Biden was saying, I have not taken a penny from foreign sources. He was attacking Trump for paying more tax money in China than the U.S. He said that he was going to hold China to the international rules, especially when it comes to the South China Sea, where South China and Japan are fighting over man-made islands. He said the taxpayers are paying for American farmers, the American taxpayers, not the Chinese. He believes that China should be, that the Korean Peninsula should be completely nuclear free. And then he claimed that the U.S. trade deficit has actually gone up under Trump. So it's really hard to figure out this tax stuff because without the physical aspects of them, you really are just grasping at straws. Newsmax said, that a lot of this stuff was true, but it's hard to see. There simply is no filing fee that equates to $750. So that's kind of out of nowhere. His own attorney, Trump's own attorney, said the bank account is open in China, continues to be open. So being closed in 2013 isn't true. And where Biden said that the deficit was higher, it's actually lower than it was for the last year that Obama and Biden were there in 2016. So that's not a true statement from them. Any questions about national security?
Could you talk more about the accounts in China? Like why a bank account seems like a relatively innocuous thing to have. Right. So like, what is the concern with a public figure having an account in another country or China specifically?
So to Trump's defense, if it was set up pre-2016, his argument is I'm a businessman. I'm trying to do business in another country. It's pretty common. But to still have it open leaves the idea that you could be compromised because if you're taking in money from another country, and you're personally benefiting, you might treat that country or that, that government slightly better than you would have had they not been helping you out personally, financially.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you going to talk about Hunter Biden's laptop? I cringe to say that, but I feel like because it's so in the news, we should talk about it.
Yeah, I stay away from a lot of that stuff. I can tell you what I've heard. There's a lot of intelligence community that's not really sure how much to believe, but at the same time, they're saying the FBI has opened up a case about it. Whether or not what the contents of that laptop are could be incredibly interesting. They could be incredibly nothing. But because of either the background of nothing is where they're not going to tell you much, a lot of everything that's coming out is speculation. So I stuck to the facts instead of the stories.
Yeah. And nothing,
on both ends, because there were attacks about
on both ends. Yeah.
I just didn't get into that.
But when it comes to the laptop, it seemed like the Daily News had done a story about it, but that other more mainstream.
Well, the New York Post.
The New York Post.
So the New York Post is more conservative. The Daily News is more liberal.
Okay. Yeah. But had any other major news outlets picked that up and looked into it or not yet? So
supposedly the Wall Street Journal had passed on it because they didn't deem it credible. Fox News has stayed pretty far away from it. Fox Opinion has, pretty much stayed with it the entire time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. Just because it came up so much.
Yeah.
To make sure we talk about it.
It came up not directly, but it was continually hinted at.
Yeah.
So if you weren't following that story, you might not have understood that that's what was being referenced.
They just kept saying the laptop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And somebody could have easily thought that was a 2016 story. Here we are.
It sounded very similar. Yeah, that's very true.
Yes. So I'm the one controlling this, so I'll go next. Like sitting here, like, all right. So the economy, everybody's favorite thing. So when they talked about the economy, they really focused on the Affordable Care Act, better known as Obamacare. And what Biden is saying is he's going to add a public option for it. So if you qualify for Medicaid, but for whatever reason your state is not offering it for you, you will get automatically enrolled throughout the country. So you will have that according to his plan. He wants to reduce premiums. He wants to reduce drug prices through competition. And then he said that 10 million people have lost private insurance because of Trump's COVID response, probably because they lost their jobs. Trump, on the other hand, said he got rid of the individual mandate associated with the Affordable Care Act. There have been 100 million people who have private health care, and if Biden gets his way, he will take private health care away. He wants to come up with a new health care plan. And if you've been following politics for the last 10 years, that is something that Republicans have said pretty much ad nauseum, but have not come up with a new health care plan yet. But, so the facts are that Biden's plan would not remove 180 million people from their insurance. It would give the public option as simply an option to people if they wanted to do that. But if they don't want to do that, they don't have to do that, and they can keep their insurance. Keep going on with the economy. One of Trump's lines for the last better part of a month or two is saying, Biden, you've been here for 47 years. I've been here for 47 months. I've done significantly more than you. Why didn't you do anything like this for 47 months? Or better yet, for 47 years? Better yet, why didn't you do it when you were vice president for 8 years? Then he said he wanted Biden wants socialized medicine. And the quote, he said he's talking about destroying your Medicare, your Social Security. I get to the heroes bill in a minute. To respond to that, Biden said he doesn't know who he's running against. He thinks he thinks he's running against somebody else. The people that he beat in the primaries wanted that. That is not Joe Biden. Then Biden said that Donald Trump is withholding tax on Social Security, and therefore it will be bankrupt by 2023. In regards to the HEROES Act, it's one of the bailout's not the right word, but it's one of the COVID plans to help people who have been struggling. And Trump says it's a bailout bill that has that is going to badly run high crime Democratic cities and states, whereas Biden says the hero bill is being held up by McConnell, and therefore he shouldn't be doing that. Then they got into minimum wage, and federal minimum wage, which Biden says he supports $15 an hour, and Trump says it should be a state option. So the truth is, Trump has not proposed the Social Security plan that withholds taxes, and therefore Social Security would not be bankrupt by 2023. There was 4 plans submitted at the same time, and the one that would bankrupt Social Security was a hypothetical plan that wasn't really associated with anybody. So that's not true. McConnell believes that states should have the ability to go bankrupt so they can relieve their debt, and therefore they can be okay. As of right now, only cities can do that. So, yeah. Any questions?
Yeah, we have a few questions here.
Sure.
So the first is, there was lots of talk of how much these health plans cost, and it's huge, giant numbers. And talking about how Medicare is funded and if taxes go up. And I think there's a lot of
I'll just make another burrito.
Oh, someone's having a burrito. There's
Make
a
some
lot
for all of us.
Yes, please bring them for all of us. There's a lot of talk about who's going to pay money and it's going to be so expensive. Can you just talk about how Medicare is funded and how that trickles down to us as people who are insured?
Sure. So if you have ever taken or will take AP U.S. government, there we go, that one, you'll learn about entitlements. There are 3 main entitlements in America. It's Social Security, it is Medicaid, and it's Medicare. Those are part of the funding in the budget that are mandated funding. They are required to be funded, and they are funded through payroll taxes. There's a separate tax. If you've ever worked, you will see that, if you've ever worked on the books, you will see that tax comes out, and that goes into a larger pool. It doesn't go into the Harrison Burnside Medicare pool. It goes into the pool for everybody. And therefore, everybody is taking from that, from what they quote deserve, and it gets funded that way. There's fears with that and Social Security that will run out because the greater generation, the baby boom generation is much larger than our generation or your generation, not your generation, and that's an issue. But what they're referring to now with this, there was conversation that Trump wanted to change the taxes so that everybody would be taking home more money in their paychecks, but this wasn't the same thing. Is there more I should add to that?
Yeah. So this is sort of related.
Okay.
I mean, I think one thing to note, because this came up a lot during the primaries when other candidates were talking about like fully public options, which Biden does not support. But I think one thing that gets lost in the conversation is that Americans pay right now a ton for health insurance.
Right.
And so usually countries that have a public option, even though taxes are higher, individuals still pay less for healthcare because it's a much larger pool. And that's like has to do with the weird, complicated way that insurance works.
Right. So in the UK, if you took AP US, AP CompGov, the one I teach, well, I teach both of them, but there's an idea of nobis oblige, basically the hiring earner people should be paying more, and it's a shared belief amongst people in the United Kingdom. So they put more into that system than say a middle class person or an average person or a low income person. That's something that happens in much of the rest of the world. It does not happen in America. To go to what Harrison is saying in the chat about is it he said before, a privilege or a human right? That is a debate. I don't think those words have been used, but you could probably ascribe them to the parties depending on who's speaking about this. It seems to be Democrats feel it's a right more than anything.
Yeah, I think AOC has said that explicitly. I think that's part of her stump language.
Yes.
Here's a question from YouTube.
Ooh.
What's up with Nancy Pelosi, Trump, and the stimulus package?
So then you have to add McConnell in there as well. So, in order to get anything through, you have to have the House agree and the Senate agree. And at the end of the day, the president agree. And it all has to be the same language. So the House has come to an agreement on something, and Trump is sort of, and they've been negotiating with Steve Mnuchin, who's the Treasury Secretary, and they came up with, and the Treasury Secretary is acting on behalf of the president. So they came up with some sort of an agreement. But Mitch McConnell has said this is far too much money. Our people will have, our senators have no interest in putting this amount of money in. So don't bother right now. We're not going to do this before the election because there are some contested seats in Colorado, in Maine, in South Carolina, places where they feel like they need to keep these seats. And if they vote on a controversial bill, they might not retain their seats. So it comes down to keeping your job while other people have lost theirs. And, the president wants a big win. Nancy Pelosi wants a big win. Mitch McConnell wants to keep his members, have them keep their jobs.
And is it contentious because it seems like the American public are quite in favor of these stimulus packages, especially because they get a check in the mail?
Right. So that's one of the more interesting things. It's like a 75% approval rating for this, and like whenever anything's that high of an approval rating, you sign it because
right.
The negatives are far less than the positives in something that is that well approved. But it's an election year. I think we all know this, but it's also right before. We're 10 days out, in a couple hours. So you just don't sign anything this big right before an election, even if it benefits
most of your constituents. Yeah. Okay. Here's a question also about medicine. Biden wants to decrease the cost of prescription drugs.
Right. Which is something that Trump has
also said
Done.
he wants to
Yeah.
do. Yeah, yeah. And so what does that mean? Like, I think the student's question is really like, is the price of prescription drugs at all tied to insurance or Medicaid or our taxes, or is that decided sort of in a different way?
So there is the idea that uh, Trump goes after the companies themselves for setting a price too high. So he has tried, going on that end and saying, well, you cannot put it this high because obviously the generic form of it is significantly cheaper. So we want you to have more money. So if you bring down your price, you can get that money. I don't know how much the taxes would be dealt to, would be put towards that. I'm sure there's some aspect of it, but I don't think it would be an overwhelming amount of it. I think that the taxes would go more to the care than to the prescription.
So is it something that needs to be like regulated with different law and different policy? Is that how they would effectively get the prices down?
So, I mean, in politics, there's a saying about the third rail. You don't touch the third rail. It's like a train. If you touch the third rail, you die. And that's usually the entitlements of Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. And by going and health in general, and by asking the health companies or asking the people to either pay more or pay less, it is a dangerous thing that nobody wants to get on board with, because you're either going to lose a lot of funding from the drug companies or you're going to lose your constituents. So it's a very fine line. And competition is something, yes, Rachel, that Biden wants to invest in is one way of saying it, but
Encourage.
yeah, encourage. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
I think Harrison has a live
Yeah.
question.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I also think that like I've heard both of them talk about the price of drugs has increased because they can increase because people still need their insulin no matter how much they have to pay for it because it's a medical condition. So I know some big companies have been exploiting that. And if the government just implements a price ceiling and says, this is the highest you can charge for it because it's not costing you any more to produce than it did. Well, it is a little more now because of COVID, but like 7 months ago, it didn't cost you more than it did 2 years ago to produce it. So why is the price increase so much?
So a fundamental aspect to that is that there are people who believe businesses should succeed or fail based off of how the public reacts to things like that and whether or not they continue to support that, not having the government involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
That's an
what people mean when they say
overwhelming.
that, like, the market will correct itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 So, but in other countries, like to Harrison's point, that same insulin might cost a fraction of the amount,
Right.
because the government does regulate that.
Yes.
I think that we regulate a lot of things already that like heads in both parties can agree that like it's not costing us this much and it's an inelastic good. So like the price can just increase and people still want the same amount of it.
Or need it if they're dependent on it. All right, Shawn, I'll let you go to the next one so we
Cool.
don't run
Because
out of time.
I've said before that science is not my thing. Like
Yeah.
but I love questions, but I get scared sometimes because I'm like, yes.
We'll have some science teachers do some short videos about what's going on with that.
Yeah, I won't sign up for that. I promise you. Okay, so then then immigration came up, which is strange because that was obviously a big topic in 2016, and a lot's changed in the last, especially 9 months. But you would have thought this would come up before. So the big story over the week was that there are still over, I believe, 500 children who they cannot find the parents of, who were separated at the border by the border agents. So Trump is saying bad people brought them here, coyotes and lots of bad people, cartels. Biden is saying these people came here with their parents. They were separated at the borders, and they weren't taken care of. Trump was on the attack quite a bit about the phrase, like, the Obama-Biden administration built the cages. So this wasn't a Trump idea. This was something that Obama and Biden put into place. He says they're working on a plan to reunite the 500 kids with their parents and that they're being well taken care of. Biden said flat out the Obama administration had made a mistake with record deportations and family detentions, and they eventually got it right, but it took way too long. To which Trump says, well, you had 8 years to do it. You should have done it then, not now. You're not president anymore. Biden saying, and this was the first time I've heard this. This is a very common debate stump speech. My first 100 days. It's called the honeymoon period. Like usually you hear everybody talk about their first 100 days. It's one of the first times I heard it. Biden says in his first 100, you're not going to hear Trump say it because it's not his first 100 days, but Biden said first 100 days, he's going to send Congress a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented people who are here and get the DACA kids who are legally here certified. Then they got to the catch and release program. Trump says he got rid of catch and release because it let murderers free, and he didn't want that. What Biden was saying was that catch and release families would show up for their hearings. Trump said only those with the lowest IQ would come back for their court dates, and that Biden was saying that Trump is the first president to have asylum seekers seek asylum in a different country than the United States. So the truth behind this is neither for the border crossers. It's 50%. It's not all. It's not the low IQ. It's 50%. And the catch and release detain criminals. So if you were a murderer, you weren't released. You were detained. I believe that's the only slide I have on immigration.
Yeah, and I just have one question, and then the next two are like big ones, so I'll let us move on. But
Okay.
I feel like we hear this a lot from conservatives about like there's a flood of criminals and all of this stuff. Is there any data? I'm not sure if there could be. Is there any data about people who enter illegally and whether or not they then commit crime? Do we have even any way of knowing whether or not that is true?
I'm sure. So again, I'm sure that is it has remarkably not been a conversation considering how big of an issue it was in 2016
Last time, yeah.
and 2017, and it kind of just went away in 2018 and 19. To be like almost a surprise that it came up because it hasn't been a conversation until the whole, well, we can't find these 500 kids' parents. I don't know the statistics of that. I know Biden brought up the fact that 20,000 of the undocumented people are frontline workers right now. But I don't know about that.
Okay. I was always
It's
interested
the first question
to
I haven't
know.
been able to answer in all these. Oh.
Well, and I didn't even know how Biden knew that,
Oh,
right?
wait, I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
No. Can anybody else hear her?
Can you hear me now?
No, I can't hear her. Harrison, can you hear her?
I can hear her.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay, good. I was like, what has happened?
It says my connection was unstable.
Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering because, Biden did say that, as you just brought up, about the frontline workers. And I wonder, how would he know that? Like, isn't the whole point that if they are undocumented, then we don't know? So
yeah, you wouldn't say, hey, I'm undocumented. Also, I'm
right. And I'm a nurse. So like, okay. So it seems like those both might be kind of squishy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next. So race in America. So this was a big conversation. It started out with the talk, which this talk is the one about that minority parents give their kids about if you encounter a police officer, what you should do if you're on the street, how you should dress, and all different ways to have to adjust your natural self so that you're not targeted for something you didn't do. And Biden said he's never had to have that talk with his own kids, but that his daughter works as a social worker, and he has seen firsthand that there is institutional racism in the United States, that we have to provide for economic opportunity, better education, better healthcare, better access to schooling, better opportunity to borrow money to start a business, and that would help. Trump was on the attack from the beginning, talking about the 1994 crime bill that Biden was very much behind. And he said it did so much harm to the black people. Tens of thousands, if not more, African Americans were put behind bars for long sentences. Trump then said that nobody has done more for the black community than Donald Trump, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. It's not the first time he said that, so it wasn't as surprising. He then touted his criminal justice reform, his prison reform, his opportunity zones, and his historically black colleges and universities 10-year long term funding. And he's saying that was more than what Obama gave. Then Biden was talking about how in 2000, Donald Trump said there's not enough people in jail, when in reference to the 1994 crime bill. And then Trump commuted 20 people sentences, and Barack Obama and Joe Biden had commuted 1,000. Excuse me, 1,000. It's not even close. 1,000 people sentences. The facts are there. Trump probably has given just as much as Obama has. Obviously, Obama probably gave more because he had 8 years. Trump in 4 years probably hasn't, but if you equate it, it's very similar. The next slide on that. Then Biden brought up the federal prison system that he had reduced by 38,000 people. He wants no minimum mandates in the law, so it's not like a minimum sentence of 10 years. He's saying flat out he is going to give $20 billion to states to change those laws so that there isn't minimum mandates, and he wants to set up drug courts because people with drug addiction shouldn't be going to jail. They should be going to rehabilitation. Trump countered by saying the only reason he ran for president was because how Joe Biden and Barack Obama did a terrible job with this. And then he claimed he was the most racist person in the room. He was the least racist person in the room, excuse me. And that politicians are all talking, no action. And that's why he's been able to get a significant amount of stuff done. The facts are the 12,000, there's 12,000 less federal prisoners during the Obama Biden presidency. The truth is there have been 38,000, but the remaining 26,000 happened under Trump's watch. So there's that.
So this one felt just like kind of a huge dodge. Like, even looking at your slides here, like Biden, it sounds like Biden said a lot of, facts and data, and the other side was just like a lot of rhetoric.
Yeah. When I do this, I always get the transcript. So I'm always making sure that like I'm 100% accurate, and it was lacking.
Yeah. I mean, it's seeing it like this, it makes it so stark, because when you're listening, sometimes I think you don't realize, and then you're like, oh, there's like a lot of substance here and like no substance here.
Right.
And do you think that this might be because Trump feels that his base is just not concerned with this issue? Or like, certainly he could have prepared things to say because he knew that this topic was going to come up.
Right. One of the things he did say was, no matter what I do, the criminal justice reform and what was the other one? The prison reform are big deals. He said, no matter what I do, I will never get the credit for that. And he seemed to not even want to go deeper into it and defend it, which probably would have helped him if he said, this is what those two laws did and how that helped people. But he either, I don't know if he didn't have the facts with him or if he just didn't think. It's possible that he doesn't think that this is something that will sway his voters. But look, I don't believe there's a such thing as a swing voter right now. It's people who don't vote, getting them out to vote. He might not believe that that's something, that this is something that would help that cause.
Get them to vote. Yeah. Okay. That was my only question. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? So then the last thing that they talked about was climate change. Trump talked about the Trillion Trees program, which when I watched this, I'm on Twitter the entire time looking at people's reactions, and people were like, that's not a thing. It's a thing. He just signed it this this week or last week, the Trillion Trees program. And then he was touting the lowest carbon emissions in 35 years. He didn't believe the Paris Accord was worthwhile because we were treated unfairly. We would have to spend trillions of dollars. Then Biden was saying Trump is eliminating all regulations to clean up the climate. His plan was to put 50,000 charging stations, retrofit 4 million existing buildings and 2 million homes to not leak as much energy, to which Trump has said they want you to have no windows. Biden said his plan will create 18.6 million jobs, whereas Donald Trump's would only do 11.6 million jobs. And then Trump's is saying that the Joe Biden plan is really the AOC plus 3 plan, and that would cost $100 trillion. $100 trillion is not a thing. And the reference to windows, they're smaller windows, but they're still windows. My mic is pretty professional, and I would like to thank Fiveable for getting me this mic.
Yeah, you're welcome. It looks awesome.
Yeah. I listened to myself the other day for 3 seconds. I can't listen that long. And I was like, oh, okay. That sounds good.
Yeah. So here's a question about, making buildings that are more energy efficient. So I live in Massachusetts, which is a state that takes this like super seriously, and actually just moved into this new house. And I have regular windows, just disclaimer, I have a large window in my bedroom even. And one thing that the state does is when you have a new house like this, they actually send energy people to your house. They came last week and they like cover all your vents and put like sensors around your house and then like blow air to like make sure that you aren't leaking. And so it was really interesting then to see this come up at the debate, because like I have a house that is energy efficient because it has to be.
Right. Because your state,
Right. Because my state has decided that.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't look at my house and be like, oh, that's a weird energy efficient house. Like it looks exactly the same as every other house you've ever seen.
Yeah. And I live in New York City, and I don't live in a high rise. I live in a house. We have houses in New York City. And they like the windows you get like I don't want to say a tax abatement, but you get discounts if you have certain, appliances or windows that are helpful with the climate, but there are plenty of states who don't have any of this stuff. So I think that's what it's trying to go towards. Granted, they do have less people, so therefore they have less homes.
Yeah, it's not about like no windows. It's about like what the windows are made out of and how they're insulated. Like a lot of this has to do with like the wrapping around a structure, and how well it's insulated so that like outdoor and indoor temperatures aren't leaking is the phrase that they use a lot.
Right. Yeah. No, Harrison, in Staten Island, there are houses. There's a lot of houses.
It's all houses.
Now, granted, there's people on both sides of me, but I got a house. Oh, no, Harrison, no. Staten Island's the 5th borough. Nope.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's both boroughs.
No, but most people, what Harrison's referring to is that most people do not consider
Borough of Manhattan. Yeah.
Well, they don't consider Staten Island one of the boroughs, even people in the 5 boroughs. So. I have another. How could I forget this? This is something that you're excited about.
Yeah.
The whole issue of fracking came up. I explained fracking the last time. I think I did a good job of doing that. I would prefer not to have to explain that again because I'm, But anyway, so Trump's talking about windmills, and he's saying windmills are very expensive. They kill all the birds. It's very intermittent how you get the power, and they're made in both Germany and China. And the fumes from them are relatively bad. Fence line families are people who live directly on, like abutted to, what do you call that? Power plants or refineries and stuff like that. And what Trump said is they are making 9 times more amount of money than they were under Obama and Biden. and that he's excuse me, he saved the oil industry. Biden said he never opposed fracking, and then he said he would rule out banning fracking, and then he said he does not want fracking on federal land. So follow that. He wants to impose restrictions on the pollution and the pollutants that come from fence line communities. And then kind of one of the big things, it was one of the last things that got said, was that he would transition from the oil industry by 2035. And Trump was taken back by that and saying, I hope the people in Texas and Pennsylvania and other swing states hear that, because that's not something that they would like to hear, because it's their jobs. So the facts, I don't know who knows this. I Googled this, and this is a very 140,438 to 327,586. I don't know who's counting this, but that's how many birds die every year in wind turbines. Whereas I also don't know who counts this, but 1 billion birds a year are killed by cats, and 1 million are killed by cars. Somebody's job is to count bird death.
Yeah. So I love the bird thing. Let's talk about windmills. In my house, we love to talk about this. This is like one of our favorite myths that we hear on the news. So another myth that I hear about windmills is that they kill fish, but I believe the opposite might be true, because it like warms the water a little bit and actually like brings in fish. But what is this about fumes? He mentioned that, and I wasn't sure what he meant.
Yeah. So what he said was the fumes from this were worse than the fumes from fracking and or natural gas lines. That's what he said. I don't know. My brother-in-law, he is a windmill like maker. He's somebody who does that. Yeah. I should probably ask him about windmills at some point, but I don't know what the fumes are either. I guess in the post, I guess, of the windmill, there's probably something in there that's emitting something, but the actual wind from it is not. The power source is probably having something. Yeah.
Interesting. And I felt like neither of them really talked about, Harrison's looking into the fumes, so we'll stand by on that.
Oh, the fume. Okay, not the bird thing, because that I didn't make up.
The bird thing is real. Neither of them really talked about any of their specific plans, other than we talked before how Trump was saying that Biden wants the Green New Deal, but we know that he doesn't actually want that.
Right.
Do we know anything about Trump's plan, or does he feel that there is not one necessary because he doesn't think that we create climate change?
So the fact that this has even been a conversation, like one of the topics at the last two debates, I don't think it was at the first debate, but definitely the vice presidential debate and the presidential debate is kind of interesting, because it is more of a liberal talking point, and it's not something that conservatives tend to go out and publicize their plans about, more usually on the attack. So the fact that it has even been a conversation was surprising, and a lot of conservatives were discrediting the debates because of that, because they seem to be a little bit liberal favoring with the topic. But no, you would not hear this at a Trump rally. You would not hear this at most of the conservatives aspects, except for saying, well, we don't want you to vote for us because this Green New Deal is going to cost $100 trillion, which is an unimaginable amount of money. That's a lot. So yeah, it is shocking to hear this.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask a question in the last few minutes, and Harrison's going to tell us about windmills.
Yes, please.
He's consolidating the information right now. We have now, like you said, 11 days until the election. Last year, in 2016, the 11 days leading up to the election were very eventful. And we heard a little bit about fears of election interference and Russian interference, which intelligence communities have confirmed did happen before 2016. And we've seen it happen in other countries. What should we be, on the lookout for? What should we be suspicious of? The laptop thing is something we said where we're like, that feels fishy. The timing feels fishy. Not sure what's going on. Like what should we be sort of discerning about and on the lookout for?
So what that report really is saying is that you're being targeted. So if you live in Texas or New York or Massachusetts or California, you're not going to be targeted because you're not going to sway the election. But if you're in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, maybe Michigan, Wisconsin, they might be going after your social media and giving you some false information towards some of the concepts or some of the topics that you might be driven to vote for. And I guess that's what they're fearing, because there were people in Florida claiming they had messages sent from, quote, Proud Boys saying that if you don't vote for Trump, we're going to find you. And that was sent from either the Iranian government or the Chinese government, not the Proud Boys themselves. So if you don't live in a swing state, I don't think you're really going to be affected by this. If you do live in a swing state, you might feel it more than not. And unfortunately, the people that they target the most are seniors.
And so they do this through like targeted Facebook content or like targeted social media content?
Yeah, targeted social media, but there was also emails. So somehow there's dispute as to whether or not what they got was public information from the voter rolls or if they got into some of the more private information. I guess it's possible that my email address is part of the public voter roll. I didn't know that, but it's possible. I don't look that far into it, but they were being contacted as of right now via email. I'm sure text messaging would be a thing too.
Yeah, that.
I got a text the other day from somebody I didn't know about the voting. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah. Here's a question someone has just before we wrap up. Can you talk about the part of the debate where Trump was talking about decreasing the value of Chinese money? He said they decreased the value of their money. And then he talked about how they paid it to farmers. But as you pointed out, like those subsidies come from American taxes. So can you talk about like what Trump was trying to say?
So from 2016, 2015, even, one of the things that Trump has said is we're not competitive with countries like China, who's probably our biggest competitor when it comes to trade, because they just have the manpower to manufacture more than anything, and they can pay their people significantly less than we can. But then they also, when they devalue their currency, they make it harder. What it does is it makes it harder for us to compete, and it makes it easier for them to just raise more revenue or raise more cash. Yen? No, not yen. What is it? I don't know what the Chinese dollar is called. And they're with the fumes. But what happens is, so there's some debate, but it seems to be pretty clear that when you put sanctions on goods, and this time it was soybeans and some of the other things that the farmers in rural America were trading with China, that the Chinese the Chinese government doesn't pay for it. They put it back into the price. And therefore, what actually had to happen was the American government had to give subsidies to the farmers of like $250 million or $250 billion a year to help them out.
Yeah.
So it was but it's easy to get bogged down in those details and not really understand. And more importantly, if you don't live anywhere near there, Juan, thank you. If you don't live near there, it's not affecting you, so you don't kind of pay attention to it because it's not much. And unfortunately, the farmers don't have a big voice, and unfortunately, the people of Wyoming and Montana and those places don't have a big voice either when it comes to national politics. Like, it's kind of East and West Coast dominated. So it's kind of that. I don't know if that's the greatest way of explaining it, but
it's basically much more complicated than it was
microeconomics.
Yeah, it's much more take econ with
Yeah, take
Bible.
econ, yes.
If you want to learn more about it. Harrison, hit us with windmill knowledge. Are you ready?
Yes. Okay. So this is not like an official scientific opinion or anything, but this is like what I've gathered from 5 minutes of Google searches.
I'm gonna fact check you.
This is how, like, isn't this how Snopes fact check with like XYZ Google results or whatever? I don't know. Okay. Wonderful. So basically, some basic things about windmills are like you can't have them everywhere. So you have to transport the power from windmills to other places. Like you really only see them, like I'm going to use Texas as an example because this is where I'm from, so I know it. So like Waco, Texas and West Texas, they have a lot of windmills because they have a lot of open space and it's very flat, Great Plains. And you can't really have those same things in Dallas, Houston, or San Antonio because it's either very like hilly or very metropolitan or there's just a lot of people. So it can't capture the energy from the wind as well and the motion because it's stopped by buildings. So when you have these windmills places, you have to transport energy on like power lines and you know, let us see, electrical industry machines is what this scientific study says. Um, so basically, when you're transporting this electricity that the windmills are generating, you have to prevent fires because, like, electricity, oxygen, oxygen fuels fire. So they use a really dangerous chemical. It's one of the halocarbons. It's an HFC. So it's sulfur tetrafluorine. Yes, sulfur hexafluoride. Sorry, sulfur hexafluoride is used to prevent these fires. But when it's emitted and when they have to reuse it, it's a greenhouse gas, and it's about 1,000 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And there are a lot of things that are that more potent than carbon dioxide. Cow poop is more potent than carbon dioxide. And basically, these greenhouse gases are not a lot in the atmosphere, but when they build up over time, they will be a lot. So basically, what I've synthesized about Trump's argument is that he's trying to say that, like, if we try to rely on wind energy, it's going to kill birds and it's going to create more potent greenhouse gases. Because, like, carbon dioxide is bad, but there are worse things like methane. Like when you burn a lot of leaf litter and like decomposing things like they do in a lot of places in sub-Saharan Africa, usually you emit methane from those fires, which is a lot more potent than carbon dioxide. So if the world powered itself on different things than we currently rely on natural gas in the United States, it would have different greenhouse gases, which haven't fully been, tested in our atmosphere to destroy things.
So we're not positive that they destroy things yet.
Science.
Yeah.
We know they destroy like things because it's obvious that they retain a lot more heat, which is what greenhouse gases do. And like they break holes in the ozone layer with chlorofluorocarbons and hydrofluorocarbons. But we don't know the scale to which things like this can happen. Like we know carbon dioxide because it's the biggest buzzword with climate change and we all talk about it all the time. But we don't know about all these things that we don't use as much in the developed world that we do this research in.
Okay. So
by the way, that's an excellent AP Comp Gov term. I like that you said the developed world and not the first world because we do not call it the first world anymore. That's one of the first lessons in AP Comp Gov.
Yes.
Harrison, have you already taken AP Comp Gov or did you just know that?
I knew that, and I've also taken Comp Gov.
Both. Okay, so there are fumes, but we need to know more, sounds like, about the impact they can have at a global scale.
Also, like, quick 15-minute tangent. Renewable energy is super new, so like we don't know a ton about it. So there's a lot of unknowns, and if we go into it blindfolded and we just like throw it in there, it's going to disrupt everything. So like we have to plan something.
Right. Unlike last time when we just started using stuff and we didn't understand what would happen with that either. Cool. All right. So on that note, Shawn, thank you for doing this. 3 times. We thought it would be 4 times, but it was 3
Yeah.
times.
It's okay.
And what can we do in the meantime if we come up with questions and we have no idea what's going on? Like, what are some good resources? You can always come check out the Fiveable community and post a question in our politics channel.
I
and
have to get in
there-
the channel apparently.
Yeah, get in that channel. There's
I
a
don't.
lot of
I don't
students in
understand
there.
channels.
I'll invite you so that you
Yeah.
can be in there. So that's all. Then Shawn will be in there too.
Yeah, because I was just going to give out my email address if you had a question, but I guess there's a channel for you to do
We'll
that.
put you in Slack. So everyone, when you join Slack, it's just #politics. Join that channel, and students are always talking about lots of different stuff in there, but it's a great place to post questions. If you hear something weird and you're like, what did that mean? I don't get it. And Shawn, do you have any particular places that you would point students to online if they want to read up on something that they hear about that seems weird?
So I am. I don't watch TV. I mean, it's very like these debates are the only times I watch TV. But if you're going to the BBC, Reuters, AP, I mean, that's kind of your go-to places. If you're somebody who's going to delve down the black hole of an MSNBC or a Fox News, what I tell my kids all the time is fine, but watch one of them one night and the other one another night. Because there is some value in it, seeing what, the other side of whatever you believe in thinks, because I think you should know that. But don't spend all your time watching those at all, ever. But yeah, Reuters, BBC, AP, those would be the top places that I would go to get your news, and then do some intelligent research, not just first click research.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you need help, just come join us in Slack and put a question in politics, put a question in any channel that you're in, and usually there's another member of our community who can help out, like Harrison did with the windmill stuff. So you never know what you're going to learn. So thank you everybody for joining us on a Friday night. Have such a good weekend, and we'll see you all next time.
Yes, see you.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Thanks for being here.